So we've just come off of our Thanksgiving holiday for those of you who celebrate it under that name. And I was thinking about what the message was going to be today. And I know that in our community, with our heightened awareness of social justice, many of us just recognize that there's more than one side to the story. And so that's what my talk is about today. It's about recognizing that for everything we experience, there's more than one side to the story. All right. And so some of us had some time on Thursday to celebrate with a Thanksgiving feast, family, and football. And that's a lovely tradition in so many of our communities, really just to get together and to be thankful for each other. And I think that's a beautiful intention to set. And at the same time, right around this end of the year, this holiday season, if you will, there are so many people who are suffering physically, emotionally, psychologically, in the body, so many people in pain because they have an experience that's so different from ours. They may feel like, I don't have anybody to share the holidays with, I don't have anybody. But one of the things that changes our mind about everything is service. So when folks go out and actually serve other people in need, folks who may be without a house or without a meal on that day, something happens. And we begin to be more grateful for what it is that we do have. And so I just want to invite you wherever you are, it's okay. It's okay to feel sad. And in this holiday season, there's an opportunity to be of service because, see, there's another side to the story. Everybody doesn't have all the things that we have, but when we look eye to eye with each other, we see the other side. And we're grateful, and folks are grateful, and we create that oneness that we speak about in the abstract. It happens in reality when we are of service. So I'm so grateful for East Bay and the service community that we are, the food that we provide, not just at the holidays, but all throughout the year. I'm grateful for who we are in our community and in the world. But there's still yet another side, isn't there, to this holiday called Thanksgiving? There's the side of the indigenous native people of this land that we call sometimes America or the United States. See, for some folks, that day is considered a national day of mourning. People express their grief at the tragedy, the genocide that has befallen their people. They come together and they celebrate their resilience in their existence, but they mourn the losses that they had. And each and every one of us owes a debt because where you are, wherever you are right now, is native land. If you're in these Americas, this is native land. And so I just want to stop and acknowledge that where I am here in the Virgin Islands, the Saboni and Arawak, the Taino people, were the first people in this place. And if you don't know the people who are the first in the place you are, find out. Find out. It's not that hard. You know, there used to be a time you had to go to the library and the card catalog. Now all you got to do is ask Google, right? Find out so you can say their names, so that you can celebrate them. And it's not just a one time little thing. Think about what is the impact of the decisions we make today on Native people whose land we stand on, the way in which we respect the land, the way in which we respect the rights of the people to have their land back. There's so many ways to get involved outside of our own selves. If you're not indigenous to these United States, it's okay to take a little extra space and a little extra time to look at the story a different way and see what is mine to do, right? How can I tell it a little differently to my children, my grandchildren, my community? How can I at least just take the time to acknowledge that there's work still yet to do for justice for Native peoples? So, you know that really all I ever get to really preach on is my own life experiences. It's just the kind of preacher I am. I come from the great Reverend Eloise Oliver, who my favorite expression of hers was always, ask me how I know, because I like to talk about the things that happen to me because they're the great lessons in my life. And I know that if I were to go, sometimes I talk to people, if I were to go up on a mountaintop somewhere, or if I was to just be too high up in a pulpit somewhere, I'd get away from the real life experiences that create the oneness between me and everyone who's listening to the sound of my voice at this time or any time. And so I like to, I don't know if I like to, I just will say that Spirit invites me to reflect on my own experiences, to really think through what is mine to share. So once again, I've got to talk about fighting. When Arlene was introducing me, she talked about how I say what I mean, and I mean what I say, and I speak my truth, and it's true, I do. And yet, every time there seems to be a little bit of blowback, that is an opportunity for me to kind of look again at not what I say, but maybe how I say it. So, a couple of things happened since the last time I was with you, East Bay, that I got to kind of take some responsibility for. So, the first thing is a couple months ago, I talked about a breakup that I was going through in a relationship. And, you just never know how things are going to land or where they're going to go turn up or who's going to see whatever you put out in the world. I just put it out from my heart. But this particular sermon seemed to have fallen in the hands of the person I had the breakup with. And let me just say, yes, let me just say that he was not too happy with my version of the story and what happened. So, as we talk about another side of the story today, he asked, I'm not sure if what he did was ask, I'm sure what he did was demand. What he asked for was a retraction, but at best, he said, I need to tell the other side of the story. So the story that you heard was that we had this great thing going and then we hit a bump in the road and he spoke to me in a way that was very clearly to me not something that I wanted to experience in my life 1 second more. Now this is true. See, and this is what insulates us sometimes for listening to what other people, the feedback that people give us is we know what's true. That's true. I'm not getting ready to change or retract that statement. That happened. But see, what he said I didn't say was my part. What happened before that happened? What was it that he was so upset about? Now, I'm going to tell you something. I don't believe that whatever you're upset about allows you to be able to talk any old kind of way. And I don't believe that if you fighting with a lot of different people, it's them. I'm just going to say, I'm not talking about your life. I'm just saying if the same thing is happening to you with different people, it's probably you. So when I got this feedback, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to tell too much truth. You know how it is on Sunday. I just give what is given to me. That's all I could do. So I will say that perhaps there was a little bit of drama on my part that went on before he lost his cool. I will acknowledge that there was a little bit of drama and that he was feeling hurt and unsupported and he lost his cool. And in his mind, he said, people argue, they argue. And I respect that. And I respect my boundary. So nobody has to be wrong. This is what we do. We want to make somebody wrong. The other side is wrong, but there's two sides, three sides, five sides to a story. And if you listen closely, you'll find out they're not just black and white. They're not just right and wrong. There's not just me versus you. And the way that I know this to be true is because it keeps happening to me. I had a conflict with a colleague and I was outdone. When I was in the 12-step program in Al Anon, my sponsor used to say, every time y'all can't see, I got my hands on my hips. Every time I would get into that, how dare you kind of feeling, I don't know if you had that feeling, but I had that feeling sometimes. Now, how dare you, right? When that feeling happens, she said, you got to pay attention because there's a lesson in that for you. So I had a colleague I had a conflict with, and I was so offended at the assertion that he made about me and that is not the truth about who I am. See, we spiritual people, we love to talk about the divine truth, don't we? That is not the truth. I am a child of God. I'm a perfect child of God, and nothing that you have ever said can interfere with my divine inheritance. But sometimes it might be something on the other side of the story you want to take a look at. I mean, I'm just telling you, for me, I had this moment of clarity where I recognized that the specific incident that was being discussed might not have happened exactly the way that he thought. But that wasn't the issue. See, that specific incident was the tipping point on a whole bunch of other stuff that I actually had done. You understand? See, we want to talk about, well, no, that's not what happened here, right there. Okay. But again, wherever you go, there you are. So perhaps there were some things that happened 2 and 3 and 4 steps ago that led him to be sort of fed up with the way that I spoke to him or the incident that happened. And so I was all blocked in on the truth of who I am and the truth of what happened on that occasion. And I needed to step back and think about his side of the story for a second. To just think about what is it that he's really upset about? Because it wasn't the little thing that happened, it was something deeper. And when I took a step back, I was able to humble myself. See, that's what we're talking about here. When we're looking for the other side of the story, it's enough to humble yourself to say, I might not be 100% right. See, when we went with Thanksgiving, we were like, oh, I don't, I'm not giving up my turkey just because Native Americans. That's not what folks are saying. We're saying there's enough space in here for you to acknowledge this is a day of celebration for some and a day of pain for others. So that's what's happening when we see the other side of the story. We get the whole picture, we get the whole idea. And if we want to be one, and we say in this church, in this philosophy, that we want to be one, if we want to be one, then nobody can be outside that circle that is me. See, because everything I am, you are, and everything you're feeling, the hurt you're feeling is the truth that I have to step into and see my part. So I just want to say there was another side of the story. And as we think about that, it's helpful when we come up against these societal issues where there seems to be one narrative that's being depicted. So if you were here the last time I was here, it was Youth Sunday. And I spoke about many things, one of which was Dave Chappelle, the comedian, and his series of comedy specials on Netflix that have caused a great deal of pain in the transgender community. And I'm going to talk about it again today. Now, some people say, well, now, Rev, why are you talking about this? Because what is done to the least of these is done unto me. Is done unto the spirit, is done unto the consciousness, is done unto the oneness. So there is no spot where God is not. And if we mean that, then when we see people are suffering, whether they're the native folks or the people we love or the people we work with or the people we don't even know, right? So many people I've talked to about this issue with Dave Chappelle don't even know one transgender person, right? But it doesn't matter whether you have somebody in your life. It matters whether you have somebody in your consciousness. See, that's what we teach here is that my consciousness is whole and wide enough and aware enough that I see everything and everyone as God. And so, what I said on Youth Sunday was that when we come in contact with a community that we don't know, we need to be in listening mode. We need to listen to people when they tell us who they are. So much of what we get in the media, and I like to talk about the television, so much of what we get in the media is somebody else's depiction. You might notice if you Black, you might know that for a long time we didn't get to tell our own story. You might notice if you're a woman, you might know that for a long time, the way women were portrayed in the media and the television was just a fraction of who we are. And so when we start to talk about listening, we got to listen to people when they tell their story of who they are. And then we also have to listen if they give us the insight of what they need from us in support. When I was talking about Native folks, there was a whole list I found online of things that we can do to support Native people, to get their land back, to honor their memory, to tell the truth in our textbooks. There's a whole lot of things we can do. And so when you're in contact with a community outside of your own and you get marching orders, march, right? Just march. It's sometimes such a little thing that's being asked. Donate something, help out, volunteer your time. Sometimes it's just a little thing that's being asked. Now, in my sassiness, my interest in telling the story in my own way, as Arlene said, I talked about another thing we need to listen to, which is that inner voice that tells us we're right. I know something about that. That inner voice that tells us, well, I need to say something about, this community because I think they shouldn't be talking about it this way, or that the second you feel like you're ready to make a proclamation about how any community should be handling their oppression, the expression I said then was lay down. Because there's this meme that went on the internet and a woman would say, lay down, and she's singing, but that was too tart, as my grandmother would say. There was another way for me to talk about this, and I want to give it due justice today because this conversation with Dave Chappelle has actually continued beyond the specials. In the specials, Dave Chappelle kind of does this thing sometimes that I like to call the oppression Olympics. He's comparing the oppression that has happened to Black folks to the oppression that has happened to gay folks. And in the last special, especially the closer, he just did a lot of that. We call that the oppression Olympics, and it's not useful, right? It's not useful to try to say whose hurt is worse than somebody else's. When you do that comparison, you forget about something called intersectionality, which is there are people who are in all of these communities. And Dave Chappelle and so many of us forget that. Let me give you an example. He went to his high school this past Tuesday, and the students had protested because, see, we think that young people are, as we like to say, doing too much. But if we pay attention, this is not just the voice of the future. These are people who are paying attention to what's happening today. They are the news flash we need about how the world has already changed. We just need to see if we're willing to keep up with the compassion, right? See, we're so worried about their canceling, but what's happening is there's a level of compassion like there has never been before for people who are marginalized and oppressed. See? So he went to the school, and there was a lot of critiques that the students gave, bless they strong-minded hearts. And one of them shouted out during his visit to the school, your comedy kills. Your comedy kills. Because sometimes we're in this bubble and we're like, oh, it's just a joke. I don't understand why everybody's so upset. But these are young people who are acutely aware of the impacts that this kind of media has on this group of people. They're acutely aware. They're all, that's what we talk about, the information age and social media. They're paying attention to the impact that these kinds of oppression Olympics erasure stories are having on the community in question. But when the student yelled out, your comedy kills, let me tell you, I don't want to just pick on Dave Chappelle because this is how we are. We want to fight back, right? Here's what Dave Chappelle said. He said, Black people are killed every day. The person said, your comedy kills in reference to trans folks. He said, Black people are killed every day, except he didn't say Black people. He said the N word. So here he is at his high school, right? And the student spoke out, your comedy kills, right? Just like Native folks might say, Americans killed us. Malcolm X used to say we didn't land on Plymouth Rock landed on us. 10 times fold more true for Native folks. Your comedy kills. He said, N words are killed every day. But see, here's the other side to the story. Who are these Black people that you're talking about, Dave Chappelle? Who are they? Because, see, we know that Black men are 5 to 7 more times likely to be murdered than white men. We know that. And because we're a conscious community, we know that women are 2 to 3 to 10 times more likely to experience domestic violence and murder and all kinds of things. We're conscious and aware of that. So when we think about the Black people that are killed every day that Dave Chappelle is talking about, we know that for the most part. But what about the Black queer people, the Black LGBTQ people? What about the Black trans people? Who are you talking about when you say Black people are killed every day? Who are you talking about? Are you just erasing all the people? Because this is what happens when we get a one story, right? The danger of a single story is that we think we can tell it for everybody involved, right? 3 Black women, queer women, created Black Lives Matter. But we still had to create a campaign that says say her name, because even though women created the hashtag, we weren't even talking about the Black women that were killed. See, some of y'all know that you could be Black and sexist, right? Some of you understand that you can be Black and homophobic, you can be Black and transphobic. So here's the deal: when Dave Chappelle was making his 2019 Netflix special Sticks and Stones, 21 of the 22 trans people who were killed that year were Black. So yeah, 5 to 7 times more likely for Black men, 95 times more likely for trans women. I'm not trying to talk about an oppression Olympics. I'm saying make a bigger tent. Understand that when you talk about a people, there's diversity within those people. The Black experience is the trans experience, is the queer experience, is the disabled experience, is the low income experience, is the woman's experience, is the Muslim's experience. The Black experience is so big. You cannot limit it to what Dave Chappelle's story is. That's not the story we want to tell. As a matter of fact, we don't want Dave Chappelle to tell the story of trans people at all. I'm up here because I want to be an ally, a support. I want to practice allyship to the trans community. But Arlene and I were talking about it last time. And the real thing to do with real action and empowerment, you really want to be an ally, give up some power. So one of the things that I've agreed to do is for one of my talks in the new year in 2022, we're going to bring trans folks to tell their own story. Because this is what I found when I talk to people. Dave Chappelle is the only person they ever heard talk about trans issues. They never heard trans people tell their own story. They heard Dave Chappelle's version of the story. Or maybe their friend who saw the Dave Chappelle got something to say about trans folks they don't know. They don't know. One of the students said to Dave Chappelle, I think you were childish in the way you handled things. He wasn't trying to, just attack me. Say, I think you were childish. Dave Chappelle told him, I don't believe you could make one of the decisions that I have to make on a daily basis. You see that arrogance, that hubris? I'm not talking about Dave Chappelle. I already talked about me. I got the same kind of arrogance because there's only one of us, right? This is said in an effort for all of us to wake up to the versions of the story that we tell, because over 50% of trans people would not even share the violence that they've experienced. So those statistics that we hear, they're so undercounted. So I might humbly offer Dave Chappelle that you couldn't face one of the decisions that community has to deal with every day in the violence that they experience. I'm just here to tell a different story. That's all I'm trying to say. We have to tell a different story. And as we hear these stories come up, it's not so we can feel guilty. It's not so we can feel ashamed. It's not so we can feel bad that we celebrated Thanksgiving or that we ate good. It's not that so that we can condemn Dave Chappelle and everything that he's doing. It's for us to recognize there is a power in our consciousness. And when we open our field of experience, of consciousness, of wisdom, of love, to include everybody, especially the people who are on the other side of the story, everything changes. That's how we make change in the world. That's how we do something different, because the crimes against Native people, Native trans people have some of the work. These women have just been disappearing from Native communities. And we just don't know what we don't know. So just listen and trust people. Just trust people to tell their own story, because First Corinthians says, when I was a child, I thought as a child, I spoke as a child. But in order for us to grow up spiritually, we've got to put away those childish things that says, my story is right, my way is right, I want it my way. Because as Corinthians says, first we start seeing through a glass darkly, but then we start seeing face to face. Now we kind of know in part. But what happens is then we shall know even as I am known. So, what that means is when I start to think of you as me, I can see more clearly. I'm not just stuck in the mirror of my own experience. I actually am looking at you face to face. And then I begin to see you as I see myself. In 1 Corinthians 13:11 through 13 closes this way. It says, "And now abideth faith and hope and love, these three. But the greatest of these is what I know you already know. The greatest of these is love. So let us love each other enough to see the other side of the story, to do better, to speak better, to take action, to listen, and to love unconditionally."